Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to walk you through some examples of RegEx which may have real-life applications, and there are 4 examples as you can see, but in today's video I'm just going to go through the first 2 because it might take too much time if I were to go through all of them. So if you're interested in this topic, please continue watching. Welcome back. So let's get started with the first example, which is to extract email addresses from a random text. And the text I'm going to use today is this multi-line string. And within this multi-line string, I have some email addresses hidden inside each line. Sometimes you don't have any email addresses in the line, and sometimes you have them. So let's get started. And my aim with this string of text is that I'm going to get a list of just the email addresses printed out onto a message box or saved into my clipboard so I can use them. So what I'm going to use is the while loop I have shown you before. So I'm going to use the while loop where I'm going to check whether the found pos is going to equal starting position. And I have already explained this and demoed this to you in an earlier video, so I'm not necessarily going to go into this in so much detail today, but I'll briefly explain how this works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a RegEx match within the loop, and I'll explain the loop a little bit later for those of you who may not have watched my previous video. And I'm going to put in the string as my input, and then I have to craft my RegEx pattern. And with the email addresses, let me just take this one as an example. So I have an email. Let me just get rid of that yellow ring thing. There we go. So this is a standard structure of email, right? So you've got the email prefix and then you've got the email domain. Now with the email domain, you may have a .au which represents a country suffix. You may not have that. For example, in case of this pseudo email hello.there, you don't have .au, you don't have .anything after .com, which is fine. And then you also know that there is an @ sign in the middle, right? So we can use that @ sign as an anchor. So I'm going to put in an @ sign here. And whenever we come across an @ sign, I want the regex pattern to check 2 things: whether a prefix of my choice is present, whether a suffix of my choice is present. Beginning with the prefix, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a group of characters by using the square brackets. And with the square brackets, I'm going to provide inside some characters that are going to represent anything that could be part of the email prefix. So what I mean by that is with email prefixes, you could have alphabet letters, right? Small letters and large letters, or capital letters, sorry. And then you could have numbers as well, right? So those would be represented by small letters A to Z and large letters A to Z and 0 to 9 and etc, etc. You can put in special characters. You do have some special characters like underscore, and then there is a hyphen. I know you can't put in every kind of special character in the email prefix. Some are allowed. You have the full stop here, which is allowed, and I don't know what else is there, but if you notice anything else, then you just gotta provide for it within our group of characters. And another thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna condense all of this into our word character. Word character represents any letters, any numbers, and I think underscore as well. So I'm gonna put in the underscore. I don't have to put in the underscore in there. And so what I need to do afterwards is this is going to capture all the letters and numbers in the underscore, and I just need to put in the hyphen as well because I want the hyphen to be captured as well. And I will put in the dot as well, full stop. So I'm going to put in the full stop here. Now when you put in the full stop in a regex pattern, you need the escape sequence, so I'm going to put it in a backslash as well. So this will capture the usual characters that you would see in the email prefix within the email address. And because I don't know how many of these characters will occur, so for example, in this email address before the @ sign, there are so many characters which I wouldn't have expected how many there would be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a plus sign, which makes the previous pattern to appear at least once or more than one time. So that is good enough for my email prefix, and I'm gonna go ahead and complete my email suffix. Email suffix is gonna be pretty similar too, and I'm gonna create a group again, and within the group I will put in the word character or word character class to capture all the letters and numbers and underscores. I don't think underscores would appear in the email domain, but that's okay. And hyphens might appear, I'm not sure, I don't think so, but it might appear, so I'll just put that in. And dots. And dots are important because you could have multiple dots like that. Now I'm going to explain this to you a little bit later, but the last dot that appears in our email domain is also going to work as kind of like an anchor, just like the @ sign. So when you have multiple dots, I don't want that to be this. I want that to be just this part here, and I'll show you why. And so if you put in the dot sign, I'm going to end this group with a plus sign, just like I did for the email prefix. And then I'm going to put in another pattern, which is going to be the dot that I explained. So escape sequence with a dot, and that, in the case of this email, that is going to represent Yahoo dot. Okay, so this is going to be Yahoo and then dot, because I want this pattern, because that is the usual pattern in an email domain within an email address. Now once I get to this dot, or this dot, in case of this email address, I'm going to put in another group that would have just the word character, because I know what follows after the last dot within an email address is going to be either .com or something like .au, representing the country suffix, or .net. So it's going to be alphabet letters, so I know that word character will successfully capture everything that is required. And again, I'll put in a plus sign to capture multiple instances of the word character. Now then I'm gonna put in output var to capture my pattern into my variable, and then I'm gonna put in a starting position. Right, starting position is this starting position, which I have to initiate in the beginning as 1. Right, and I'm going to assign the result of this regex match function into found pos, and this is going to give me the position of the regex match, this pattern, assigned into the found pos. And so in my first iteration of the while loop, what I'm going to get in the found pos is going to be, when it finds this email, it's going to find the location of this position that you see up here, that's gonna be assigned to found pos as a number. And I'm going to go ahead and create an output var list and append to this the output var, which is going to be the pattern that we are capturing using the regex pattern, which is gonna be the email address. And then I'll put in a line feed to separate out the first entry with the second entry and the next entry, and so on and so forth, with a line break. And then I'm going to update the starting position with a new value, and that new value is going to be starting with the found pos, which is going to be in my first iteration of the loop. It's going to be this number here, right? So whatever the number of characters this is plus the line break, I'm going to get a number that represents a position of the place that you see here. And then to this position, I'm going to add the length of the email, right? And the reason why we do that is because, and you can add the length of the email by putting in the output var. I need to fix this up. And if you add the length of the email, then your new starting position will be this position, right? And from this position, we're gonna start searching for a new email address. And you will see that when you see this @ sign, regex will understand, hey, there is an @ sign. And so it will check whether the prefix will match, this will match, and then it will then check whether the suffix would match, and it would match that. And therefore, when we do a message box, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the result also into my clipboard, and that's going to be output var list, right? I'm going to display the result into output var list. And so if I go ahead and run this, I just get the emails printed out in my message box. And then if I go to say line 21 and do a paste, then I get the email list pasted out. As you can see, I have got 1 2 3 4 5 6 emails, which matches the number of emails that I've got. So there are 6 email addresses that have been successfully printed out, including the country suffix for Australia. Now, as you can see, there are 2 additional lines that I don't really need. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim this. And these are the line breaks that I don't really need. So I'm going to put in the trim function to take out all the unnecessary line breaks that occur on the right hand side. So if I go ahead and run it again and then place my focus on the 21st line and then paste my clipboard in, then I get just the email, the 6 email addresses pasted in. So that's how you get the email addresses extracted from a random string that has email addresses embedded in them. And another thing I'm going to explain to you, actually, you can also capture this as a sub pattern. So for example, what I'm doing right here is I'm going to capture this bit, which represents the email prefix, as a sub pattern. And if you watched my previous videos, you will notice already, if you put in number 1 after the output variable name, that means it's a pseudo array, and number 1 means the first sub pattern that you captured, which is going to be the first pair of parentheses, right? And the next pair of parentheses I'm going to put in is going to capture the email domain, and that's going to be output bar 2, right? So let me just first go ahead and run this and see just the first bit, just the prefix of the email showing up like in this manner in my message box. And also if I change this to output bar 2, this is just going to give me the email domain instead of everything. All right, so that's how you extract the email prefix and the email domain separately. Now let's move on to the extraction of URLs from random text. And so I've got a huge random string of text here where I have all these URLs. These URLs point to some useful RegEx learning material available usually from the AutoHotkey website and the forum, which you can visit if you're interested and study on your own. But what I'm going to do in this example is I am going to extract all the URLs. Some of these URLs are positioned as a single line on its own, and some of them are going to be placed inside the line, and sometimes you might have a space in the beginning of the URL, before the beginning of the URL, and a space after the URL. But this one here doesn't have a space before the beginning of the URL, but you do need to have a space after the URL, because otherwise, let's say if I delete this space, no program in the world is going to know whether the URL it ends with a text or text zeros, right? So it's important that in your source string you have at least the URL separated by space at the end. At least the beginning is okay because we're going to use HTTPS as our start of our regex pattern. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the same methodology. So let me just go Control Z to bring up my old formula, which is right here. Let me just delete that. I'm just going to update the string with the new string, and I might just get rid of this. We know what we are doing. We're getting the URL, so let me just remove the title. And so I'm going to use the same methodology. Like I said, I just need to update the pattern. So let me just get rid of all of this. And so it's pretty straightforward how the URLs usually start. So let me just grab that as an example. And so I have got HTTPS, and sometimes you don't have the S, which stands for security. It's for verified websites where your data that you send gets encrypted and etc. So HTTP is a less secure version of the website, so to speak. And because not all websites are HTTPS with the security certificate issued, so what we have to do in case of our regex pattern is that we can put in an S, that's fine, but we have to make it optional in case the S is not there. And then what we're going to do is we have this colon here, right? So I'm going to put in the colon and then the 2 forward slashes, and then we can start our wildcard of full stop, right? Full stop represents any character basically, and then I'm going to put in either a plus or I can put in a star sign as well. Doesn't really matter because we know there's going to be something after the forward slashes, and then at the end there is going to be a space or a line break in this manner. Now you can put in something like a space and a line break like that, carries return and line feed, but you can also use the white space character which represents both space and line breaks and tabs and etc. This is covered in my character class video, so if you want to look into this more, then you can go and watch that video. In our case, we are able to capture both the space and the line break, so this is good enough. And notice how sometimes in some examples, maybe none of these, but what I'm gonna do is sometimes maybe you will have a full stop at the end, which is not recommended, but maybe in your data source you do have some full stops like that and you don't want that. You just want the URL to end with the final part, which is htm or .com and etc, right? You don't want the dot to appear at the end. So in order to get around that, you can put in a dot, but you have to make it optional because the dot could be there or could not be there. If you put in the dot and don't make an option, then regex pattern is going to always search for that dot and fail to find a match if there is no dot at the end of the URL like that. And so you have to make that optional by putting in the question mark. And when we extract the URL, we are going to extract the entire thing like that unless we try to capture the sub pattern, because we don't want this extra white space, which could be a line break or it could be a space. We don't want that. We just want the URL. So I want to leave this one out, as well as the dot that may or may not be there, because dot is not necessary for our URL. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap this in parentheses, and so only this bit is going to be captured as a sub pattern. And so I'm going to update this to output var 1, and then I think that is then good. And so if I go ahead and run it, I should in theory get all the URLs, but I've got some rubbish like this, so I'm gonna have to figure out what is the problem. So let me take a look at this and see what I've done wrong. And I realize what I've done wrong. I have forgot to make this regex pattern search lazy or ungreedy, and you can do that by putting in a question mark after the star sign. So what it did when I ran it, what it did is it found that and that was a match because there was HTTP and blah blah blah, and it then went ahead to look for the dot, which may or may not be there. So if it didn't exist, that's totally fine, but what's required is white space at the end. So when it found this match, it understood that the next character is a line break, which is considered a white space as well, but it didn't stop there. It went greedy and went all the way until the end, until the very end, to find the last line break that occurs. There is no line break after this line, so there's no line break here. That is the end of the string, so it stopped here because that was when the last line break occurred. And so you have to put in order to get around that, a question mark after the star sign in order to make this ungreedy. And so if I do it again, I should be able to get just the URL. And let's see how many there are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There are 10 URLs, but in my string there are 11 as far as I know. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So there's one missing, and I know off the top of my head the last one is the one that is missing. So you can see that we have captured up to this one here, 159.193, which is the last URL here, and so it failed to capture that, and that is because regex pattern did not recognize this as a pattern because we are missing a white space at the end, because there's no space, no tab, no line break. And so to get around this, you could use the boundary, but boundaries, I noticed, struggle with the full stops. So I decided not to use the boundaries, and what I opted for is to append a new line in my haystack. And in that manner, we will be able to find this match because there's going to be a new line break appended at the end. And so if I save it and run it, we will be able to see the last URL being captured as well, and that will have been inserted into my clipboard with the additional line breaks removed at the end of the string. And if I go ahead and paste it, I will see that all my URLs have been successfully captured in a very clean manner. Alright, so that is it for today's video. In the next video, I'm going to go through the remaining 2 examples. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.